Easter. And Easter is a 50-day season that begins with the resurrection of Jesus and ends with the ascension of Christ. According to UMC discipleship, Easter is a time when both newcomers to Christianity and those who are already Christians revisit the foundations of the faith. We look at what it means to be a Christian and what we are called to do to follow Christ. Are we missing a third person? Okay. Divide it up among you. And today's gospel lesson is really a story in two parts. The first half of the story, that Doug read for us, talks about a miraculous catch of fish. Many things about it make it miraculous. We'll talk about that in a minute. What's maybe a little bit unusual is that the actual number of fish, 153 of them, were identified in this story. If you've ever been fishing, I have. It's not my favorite thing to do, but if you've ever been fishing, 153 fish caught in one day is a lot of fish to catch in one day. So I think just the mere number that they caught was identified in the story to make it so that you knew that it was a lot of fish. It was an unusual thing. The story takes place after Jesus' resurrection. It's a couple of weeks after he was resurrected from the grave. And the first few times that Jesus appeared to his disciples, he appeared to them in Jerusalem. This particular story takes place in Galilee. So the disciples had been wandering around a little bit. They weren't really sure what they were supposed to be doing. I don't know if any of you have ever had that feeling. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing for God. But they were wandering around and they decided they're going to go home. How many of you just want to go home sometimes? I know I do. I'm doing stuff and I just want to go home. Well, they did that. They just went home and they went back and they're hanging out. And Peter, always impulsive Peter, says, just like Doug said, I'm going fishing. Now this was their livelihood, if you'll recall. Before they were called by Jesus to follow him, these men were fishermen. So this was not something that was unusual for them. They were commercial fishermen. They knew how to fish. So 6 other guys, at least, that we know of that were identified in the story said, yeah, I'll go with you. That's fine. I know how to do that. I'll join you. They got a boat that was big enough for at least 7 of them. They had all their nets. They went out at night. And one of the things to remember about the Sea of Galilee, it was about 13 miles long and 8 miles wide, so not exactly a sea. Doug identified it as the Sea of Tiberias. It was known as many names, but it was the Sea of Galilee in which they were fishing. And it was calmer at night. During the day, there would be winds that would come down from the mountains. I don't know how much you know about the Sea of Galilee. It is the lowest freshwater lake on Earth, and it's below sea level. The Dead Sea is the only lake that's lower, but that's a saltwater lake. So this is the lowest freshwater lake on Earth, and it's in a valley. So these winds would come down from the mountains and make the lake very choppy during the day. So at night it was calmer. So they often fished at night when they wouldn't run into storms. So they were out and they were fishing all night. And delayed gratification is not good. How many of you like things right away? I do. I want something I want it right now, right? I don't like to wait. And delayed gratification has always been difficult for the children of God. So these guys went out fishing and they wanted to catch fish right away. And Peter and his friends that are waiting on God's next move, they didn't know what to do. They were going to go do something that they knew how to do that could get them instant gratification. It was going to get them fish, and they were going to feel good about it. So unfortunately, they didn't catch any fish at night, right? Fishing was a distraction for them, but they were waiting for fish. They were waiting on God. They were waiting for further instruction. And they fished all night. It wasn't fun. It was frustrating. It annoyed them. It made them angry. In the morning, when the sea started to get a little choppy with the winds coming down, it's not a great time to fish, so they were heading back into shore. Fruitless night, they see a guy standing on the shoreline. They cannot make out who it is. They were about the length of a football field off the shore, so it's pretty difficult to identify somebody's facial features from 120 yards away. And they saw somebody standing there and said, "Hey, children, did you catch anything?" Jesus had appeared to disciples a number of times, right? He appeared to Mary Magdalene when he first was resurrected. Did she recognize him right away? She did not. She didn't recognize Jesus until he called her by name, something that he had done a number of times. Then he appeared to the disciples on the road to Emmaus. Did they recognize him? They did not. They did not recognize him until he sat down with them and broke bread and ate with them. They did not recognize him until he did something that was a normal thing for Jesus to do with them. The disciples in the boat did not recognize Jesus. He was standing on the shoreline. They had been traveling with him for 3 years. He was not usually that far apart from them. They did not recognize him. Oftentimes we're preoccupied with what we're doing and we don't recognize Jesus. They were preoccupied with getting the boat back to shore. But the guy on the shore called to them, "Drop your nets on the other side of the boat." Now, they're commercial fishermen. How do you think they felt when some random guy on the shore said, "Did you catch anything?" And they said, "No." I said, try the other side of the boat. Now, seriously, how big is the boat, right? Maybe from John to me across? Why would there be fish on the other side and they weren't on this side? But something about the way that he asked them made them do what he said. And they dropped the net on the other side and they caught 153 fish. All of a sudden, John realized and said, "It's the Lord." Did John jump overboard and swim into shore? No. Who did that? Peter. Peter was very impulsive. Peter did a lot of impulsive things. He was the one who jumped out of the boat to walk on the water with Jesus. Peter was the one who, although he didn't know what to say when Jesus was transfigured, blurted stuff out anyway, incorrect or not. He needed to talk. Sounds a lot like someone I know, but he needed to say something, so he blurted stuff out. Peter was the one who said to Jesus, "You're not washing my feet." But when Jesus said, "I'm going to," Peter said, "Are you going to wash all of me?" Right? Peter was pretty impulsive. Peter was the one at the Garden of Gethsemane when the guards came to take Jesus, whipped out his sword and sliced off the guy's ear. That was Peter. He did stuff before he thought about it a lot of times. So what did Peter do here? First of all, he didn't have any clothes on because they're out in the middle of the water and that's it. So he threw on some clothes and then he jumped overboard and he swam into shore. He couldn't even wait for the boat to get into shore. He wanted so badly to be with Jesus that he impulsively jumped over and swam into shore. What happened when he got there? Jesus is standing there with fish. Not sure where he got them, right? The fishermen are the ones with the fish. And bread and a fire. Okay. Ladies, can you help me out? I'm going to have these two ladies read to you for a moment.
Simon, Peter, and another disciple followed Jesus. Because this other disciple was known to the highest priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. However, Peter stood outside near the gate. Then the other disciple, the one known to the highest priest, came out and spoke to the woman stationed at the gate. And she brought Peter in. The servant woman stationed at the gate asked Peter, "Aren't you one of this man's disciples?" "I'm not," he replied. The servants and the guards had made a fire because it was cold. They were standing around it, warming themselves. Peter joined them there, standing by the fire, and warmed himself.
When they landed, they saw a fire there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." When they finished eating, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Simon replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs."
Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing with the guards, warming himself. They asked, "Aren't you one of his disciples?" Peter denied it, saying, "I'm not."
Jesus asked a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Simon replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus said to him, "Take care of my sheep."
A servant of the high priest, a relative of the one whose ear Peter had cut off, said to him, "Didn't I see you in the garden with him?" Peter denied it again, and immediately a rooster crowed.
He asked a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was sad that Jesus asked him a third time. "Do you love me?" he replied. "Lord, you know everything. You know I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. I assure you that when you were younger, you tied your own belt and walked around wherever you wanted. When you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will tie your belt and lead you where you don't want to go." He said this to show the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. After saying this, Jesus said to Peter, "Follow me."
Similar stories, different outcomes. Same main characters. The first time, Peter was denying that he knew Jesus, and he did it 3 times. So now, the second part of the story that Doug read us this morning, after the fishermen got back to the shore and they had breakfast with Jesus, Peter was standing by charcoal fire. The Greek word for charcoal fire, and I'll probably pronounce it incorrectly, is anthrakia. And that's where we get our word anthracite. And that particular word occurs only 2 times in the entire New Testament. Once in the courtyard scene where Peter is denying knowing Jesus, and the second time on the shore where Jesus and Peter were standing together. 3 times Peter had denied Christ by a charcoal fire, and now 3 times Christ is going to restore his denying disciple again by a charcoal fire. Jesus symbolically wiped away Peter's 3 denials by asking him 3 times if he loved him. Peter wasn't only forgiven, though. He was drawn back into the community of disciples, and he was given meaningful work to do. Feed my lambs, feed my sheep, tend my sheep. We are commissioned at baptism and when we join the United Methodist Church, as a lot of our confirmands will be doing, to share in the work of Jesus. But oftentimes we fall a little bit short. We fail to give witness, we fail to share what we have with others, we fail to speak, we fail to act. But the good news is that Jesus doesn't just commission us, he forgives us when we fail. He doesn't just forgive us, but he calls us to try again. And he doesn't just call us to try again, he invites us to share what we have, and then he gives us meaningful work to do. Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep. Following Jesus means putting your nets back into the sea on the other side of the boat, even though you're tired or you're disappointed. It means knocking on another door, even though none have been opened when you knocked in the past. And it means trying new things to try to bring Jesus to people that don't know him today. Our goal as United Methodists are to create disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, and we can do that by following Jesus. Jesus is calling us over to himself by that fire. We hear his voice and we come. He's restoring us, and no matter how many times we've failed in the past, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 30, 300, it doesn't matter. Jesus will pick us up. He is restoring us to himself because he has good work for us to do, and he is going to bless whatever he is calling us to do, individually, as a church, as a denomination, and as Christians in the world, whether it's in life, in church, in home, at work, in your family, or in your community, as long as we follow Jesus and do as he asks. Amen. If we could turn in the United Methodist hymnal to number 670, we will sing "Go Forth for God."